Hi everybody. So let's start in our normal way by, Danny, do you just want to give us a brief summary of your career up until this point?
Okay, it's a bit random.
That's fine.
So I started many years ago as an accountant, so I'm a qualified accountant, no booing. Sort of realised it wasn't for me, so then quickly went into like a business management type role, running bids. So this was all in predominantly in a telco company called eventually become Wootton Technology, so a big telco infrastructure company. From there I went to sort of business management, contract management, bidding, so still in the same organisation. So I was in the same company for about 15 years. And roles kept changing. But in that role, I tended to spend quite a lot of my time beating the product house up to not have all the flexibility we needed to go win business. And so one day I got asked to go and lead the product company. So for a non-techie, that was quite a big challenge, working with 100 odd product managers and delivery. So did that for a number of years. Got made redundant when the downturn of the telco.com industry happened, which in hindsight actually was the best thing that happened to my career, I think, at that point. And then went and did 6 years of my own startups. So in that period of time, we needed to try and earn a living. So we did a bit of consultancy, helping small companies with either technical skills they didn't have or marketing skills. There were three of us in the little team we had. But then we also did a number of our startups as well. 2 that we started ourselves and 2 that we really liked the solution that the entrepreneur was doing. So we worked for sweat equity within that. And then through that period of time, we had 2 failures and we managed to exit 2. Not for huge money, but we managed to exit fairly early and get some return on our investment. And then I went from there to be head of innovation for a system integrator that was Logica at the time, become CGI. Did that for 9 years. Met Richard, wherever Richard is, at the back. So we used to work together in that space. That was a great period of time to, again, build another dimension onto the things I'd worked on. And actually spent a lot of that time working with companies coming to pitch to us around their solutions. And that was always quite interesting because you have a bit of a mixed bag and spend a lot of time coaching the company to then come and pitch to us again, which was quite an interesting thing. And then 2 years ago, I got approached to become head of innovation for IT systems at the MOD. And I've been there a couple of years now, and as we were saying earlier, I've probably got another year, I think. Trying to achieve all the things we set out to. So a bit of a random path to get to where I've got to, really.
But as you say, you've been working in innovation and small business and seeing pitches for quite a period of time. Yeah. So 9 years in CGI and then now
a couple of years now, yeah.
So we can talk about MOD specifics, but we'd also like to talk about, if you're a small business, how you sell into a bigger business. Because I think a lot of people do try and do it and then somewhat become overwhelmed by the amount of time it can take, the amount of resources. So could you perhaps highlight some of let's start with the negatives if we could.
Okay.
So let's start with some of the mistakes that you see small businesses make when they're coming to pitch to a big company. Are there any that you could particularly highlight? Yeah,
I think the biggest one and the most common one is, I've got some great technology that you need to buy, is the pitch. And then spend the next hour talking about the technology.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work, no. So, I mean, a lot of things I'll talk about tonight, they're not rocket science, they're pretty basic stuff, but you'd be amazed how many times and the percentage of companies that come in with that type of pitch. So, on one hand, it's sort of good because people are really passionate about the thing that they've created, but on the other hand, it's the not understanding the customer. So the customer actually isn't that interested in the technology. What they're interested in is what is your proposition? What problem of mine are you solving, or what opportunity are you creating? And say it sounds very obvious, but actually that's probably the biggest thing where even now, even in the MOD, you'll still get companies, big and small, so it's not just an SME problem, who will come and pitch their tech. rather than pitch the proposition.
Okay, that's interesting. And I presume that with the MOD, you are getting a slightly more biased view of what those products might be. So you'll get people pitching traditional or specific military products.
Yeah.
But I presume your remit is far wider than just military products, presumably.
Yeah. So my remit is all IT systems in the MOD, which can be everything from our HR system, our Office 365 desktop, all the way through to Intel systems, logistics, and all the very, very military side of things. Right across those, one of the big things that we're constantly asking for is actually we want to move away from the days of very bespoke military systems. So, probably roll back 5 years, everything we bought ended up being very bespoke to our need, painted green or blue, and cost a fortune. Where we're trying to get to is to say 80% of what we do actually is no different to any other company. So, we are a 200,000 people, big logistics organization, people management organization, manage a huge amount of information with a pointy bit at the end that we do. Yeah. But actually the majority of what we do, and therefore the majority of the systems that we need, there's no reason why we can't leverage what industry are already doing. So that's what we try and help people get their head around.
And are you seeing a big move to, I hate using the word, but cloud on demand stuff?
Yep.
Do you still have a heavy installed base, or is that installed software base, or is that something you're trying to move away?
We do. So our strategy is wherever possible, cloud first. Wherever possible is a bit of a big caveat, but where we can, so one of the information categories we use is official. So official data can be shared outside of the MOD. So where it's an official category, we want to use commercial cloud solutions. We want to move software and processing to cloud. We want to use SaaS services. And that is probably 70% of the things that we do are done at official level. So there is a big push. We're not there yet. We've got a lot of transition still to do, a lot of legacy applications that need to be refreshed and moved to the cloud. But most of the time we want to use commercial cloud solutions. And even where the data goes to secret, my team have a project at the moment of how do we use commercial cloud for secret? Because we think technology is becoming advanced enough for us to now be able to do that. And we just obviously need to do a lot of testing, a lot of accreditation work to enable us to do that. But we think we nearly getting to that point.
Okay. And so where do SMEs fit in that jigsaw? I mean, I'm assuming that if the MOD decide that they suddenly need a new HR system, then, for example, it's going to be very difficult for an SME to come along and say, we've got a nice new HR system, you should come and talk to us, as opposed to talking to a consultancy with PeopleSoft or whatever it may be, or SAP HR or whoever it is. Do they fit in there, or do they fit in a slightly different way?
So slightly flippant comment, they should fit everywhere. However, so some of the questions that we have 7 questions that we go back to companies of all sizes saying, actually, can you answer these questions for us? Because either that says it's an innovation project, therefore my team can engage, or actually you might still have a great solution, but actually you have lots of other competitors, therefore you need to go through a competition. So the HR example, if you can answer one of the questions that says, how does your solution scale, and how will you help implement that into an organization the size of MOD, there's no reason why you can't be in the mix to win that contract. It will be a fairly long, protracted procurement thing for something that size. But I think culturally we have moved that says we don't always need to buy from an SAP or an Oracle anymore. It's about the solution that we buy and whether it scales and has the right level of support, that type of thing. Mm-hmm.
And are those 7 questions secret, or are they?
No, I have them written here.
Excellent.
And I will share them. So I mentioned earlier, one of the things that is still work in progress for at the moment is we don't make it easy for you guys to come and find our challenges. That's improved a little bit with the launch of the Defence and Security Accelerator, where some of our challenges are on there, and there's open calls where people can put their open ideas in. There's a piece of work at the moment to create a single portal where all of the innovation teams and research teams in MOD will publish all of the challenges in the same place. So you guys will have one point to go and say, either if I've got an idea, where do I pitch it? Or actually, what problems are they trying to solve, and do I have something that can solve that problem?
Could we just talk about the challenges for a second?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are those, do they work to a timetable, or are they on demand, or how does that process work?
So it depends on the route. So if it's a DASA challenge and it's a themed challenge, they have a specific timetable. So they will launch, so I think they just launched one around people.
Okay.
So how do we, there's like 4 challenges within it of how do we better engage with our people, do better recruitment, etc., etc. They did one previously which was around how do we improve the machine-human interface to be able to absorb information. So those things have a very rigorous time, deadline to submit your proposal by, and then an evaluation criteria, and then different phases. The challenges we run, they're less specific on time frame, but we will launch a challenge to market that says, this is the problem we're trying to solve. We're open to any company who has ideas or a solution that can help us solve that problem.
The topics that you're working to, presumably those literally just are pretty random, and they're governed by the need that you have at that particular time.
Yeah.
So in terms of whether it's a DASA challenge or whether it's your challenge, it's a matter of keeping an eye on the correct publication to see if something
at the moment
hits.
Yeah.
If something you're doing fits with what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the moment it's the portal.
Yeah.
And for us, it's through industry bodies like Tech UK and ADS and Team Defence Info. Yeah. In the spring, hopefully the portal will be online, and that'll be a single place for people to go and look and say, okay, what challenges are they working on?
And is there any way outside of that people can just give you a ring and say, Danny, I've got this really cool piece of product, can you buy it? Obviously not say that.
Got some tech. We're very open. So I'm easily findable on LinkedIn. Ping me on LinkedIn. I will respond quickly, so I do keep up to date on it. And through that, I'll probably answer going, here's the 7 questions. Can you answer the 7 questions? And then once we get into dialogue, either I'll go, actually, this is a challenge that we have. And share those, or we can just talk through what it is you're doing. A lot of the time it might be projects that we're running, or I'll just signpost you to somebody else, but I will make an intro for you. But my pushback is I will be quite tough on answering the proposition question, because then I have some credibility when I introduce you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want me to go through the 7 questions?
I was just thinking we could just keep them waiting a bit longer. Okay. No, I think we should. Yeah, let's go through the 7.
So they're pretty high level, again, pretty simple. So what problem are you solving, stroke what opportunity are you creating? So I'm not interested in tech, I'm interested in the thing you help me do. The really hard one, which is what is your USP and against whom? We have lots of companies say, I'm the leader I'm the best company to talk to because I have really good people. Yeah, but sort of everybody else says that as well. So what's your USP and against whom? And this is one specific to our team around what is it you're doing that is particularly innovative? So how do I engage with you versus how do I just point you to a competition? So I'm interested in the real innovative bit. What level of maturity is the solution you have? It doesn't have to be mature, and I'll talk through a little bit about the different routes. but just understanding where are you in that. Is it concept, or do you have something which is already being deployed somewhere? How does it scale? So the HR question. So, we have hundreds of thousands of people, tens of millions of things, whatever. So we need to know whatever you do can scale with us. And generically, what's the cost benefit of the thing that you're providing us? So we don't, obviously it's a bit difficult, we don't create revenue for our organisation, but we're still interested in, does it help us save money? Does it mean we can become more effective in the way we do something? If it's a real military thing, does it give us an advantage over our enemy? So it's just those things, very simple, but we just, really have a think about them when you come to pitch to us.
So let's hone in on the one about the maturity.
Yeah.
Because one of the specific questions we were asked by someone that couldn't be here was around whether you look for startups that are actually pre-revenue or revenue generating or have a working product, or whether it's just an idea. Could you talk us through that a little bit more?
Yep. So if you went back a few years ago, the size of the company and the age of the company would have been a thing we would have worried about. We're actually not really worried about that anymore. If you're a real brand new startup and you haven't had investment and you haven't got any revenue, there'll be some tougher questions around, if we engage with you, how do we know you're going to be around? But it's not a blocker. So the main questions are really around the maturity of the solution you have. And generally there's three routes into mod. If you have a concept, then, if you want to do some research on something, then DSTL, so the Defence Science and Technology Lab, over in Wootton, that would probably be your point of call, that you would do a joint research project with them. If you have a project or a product that's in sort of low TRL, so it's concept through to you're demonstrating it in a lab or in a very controlled environment, then the Defence and Security Accelerator is probably your best route for that. And the advantage about that is you can put it through the open call, so you don't have to wait for a challenge. And if you're able to articulate some of those questions, then they will connect you with end users, they'll provide you test environments, and they'll provide you a stream of funding. You own all the IP, so we don't take any IP through the DASA route. And so potentially it's a good way to move your concepts forward with end users, having access to end users and those environments. If it's either, so we are a recipient of DASA projects, or if you have something which is already mature in terms of it can be deployed, then you can come straight to us or some of the other innovation teams in the frontline commands.
So there's a thing that we talked about briefly before about you don't pay for software early stage.
In the alpha and beta.
Yeah. So, and I think that's quite important. Back to your point about people going and saying, I've got this tech, will you pay for it?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of startups at the moment, certainly in the product area, are always taught to basically get paying customers.
Yeah.
So if you can get a paying customer, then you're well on the way to proving your point. So how does that work with you guys? If you're not paying for product,
yeah,
how does the business justify that?
Okay.
What do you think the value that they're getting back is?
So on the DASA part, again, they're not paying for product, but they are paying you to develop your product. From our perspective, we take the view that, so we have an alpha beta delivery readiness model. So my team's quite lucky, we don't have to implement into live, we just do the front part of the process. But we have a view that our alpha is really, does it do what it says on the tin? So we get lots of pitches. If they're a good one, we want to engage. But really, at that point, we're still dependent upon you actually telling us the truth that your product does actually what it's, does do what you say it does. So our alpha is just, let's test it. Let's test it in a non-MOD environment, so pure cloud or whatever else you need to do the testing. And we will just ask you to make the claim. So what performance claim do you say it can do, and then meet it? Which is sort of quite a funny thing to do anyway, because you end up seeing some companies who make a claim and then maybe backtrack a little bit when you ask them to test it. But that's the first part. So our view is that's your sales process. So we shouldn't pay anything for that, really. When we go to a beta, the beta is putting the solution in our environment, on our networks, with our users, and with our data. Our view is actually we're still not using that in live. We're still trying to make sure we understand how it works, and so we end up being more educated to buy the right thing. Our model there is we won't pay for software, because we might just throw it away after 3 or 6 months, but we will pay for your time. So we recognise that as an SME, you don't have a whole load of cash to do sales process. You generally will be quite small, so having somebody spend a few days with us or a week with us going through our testing is quite a big overhead for you. So we will pay for that time. But our view is the software part is the thing you're investing in anyway, and ultimately you might get a sale out of it. So it's still, from a software perspective, it's still part of the sales cycle.
And how long do obviously everything will change, but what's a typical length of an alpha and beta stage for
Alpha
you?
is no more than 30 days. Beta is ideally no more than 6 months. Sometimes they go 9 months. Some are a lot shorter. It really depends on what it is we're testing. Because what we're trying to find out in the beta, the way it works on the networks and the way it works on with the data is you can do quite quickly. You can't always do the end user feedback quickly. You need to get them using it for a while. And historically, we have a track record of deploying things out to the people on the front line who will then go, who the hell designed this? It will never work in our environment. So we really want to make sure the end users are using it to get that feedback.
But in some ways, that makes you a very good early stage customer for some businesses. And the reason I say that is that some of my background in selling for big business is that they would ask for we'd sort of not have the alpha because the product was there,
Yeah.
but they'd ask for the beta, and that would last 6 months. They wouldn't be paying us for products, and they certainly wouldn't be paying us for time.
Yeah.
So you're doing, and do you think that reflects your own experience of small with big business? I mean, it's very different. A lot of big businesses, from my experience, tend to say, yeah, I like the idea, but I'm not going to pay for it for 6 months, and expect the small business to just accept that. Is that fair, do you think?
I think it is. My two that failed were cash flow. We actually, one was timing. We were bizarrely too early to the market, but generally both failed because we ran out of money, and so I think a bit of that stayed with me, that a lot of SMEs are strapped for cash, and therefore we need to enable them to do business with us. So covering labour costs, I don't expect people to make money out of it, but we will cover cost.
Okay, that's excellent. And you mentioned the accelerator there. Do you want to talk a little bit about the accelerator that you ran? When
the hackathons.
The hackathons, sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
the hackathons. Yeah. So one of the things we introduced last year was hackathons. We'd never done them in MOD before. So the first one we did was around AI and machine learning. We had 4 challenges. We did how do you automate the creation of maps from imagery? How do you take shipping data and create pattern of life from ships around the world? And some that turn it off and disappear, and then that obviously raises a flag of why is that Russian trawler just turned off their tracking device. The third one was around program management data. What can we learn from the data if we apply machine learning to it? And then the fourth one was what can we understand around a whole load of housing, employment and veteran data to hopefully better look after our veterans. and could we learn something from that? So that was the first one. That was a big learning curve for us. I'd never done a hackathon either, either been part of one or run one. And I must admit, I actually find the whole thing fascinating. I love the forming, norming, storming bit of how they work. And then, but then we did 2 last week. Bit of advice: never do 2 in the same week. That's probably what I would say. The first one we did was around video analytics. So we, the problem we were trying to solve is, how do I automate the ingestion of video, so CCTV and whatever else we could find, and then how do I automate the understanding of pattern of life? So the project we did was, we had 17 terabytes, I can't remember how many hours that was, but 17 terabytes of video data around the Parsons Green bombing, which was the bomb on the tube that luckily didn't go off. It detonated but didn't explode. And the challenge we gave to people is, here's all the files. There were 140 proprietary formats that weren't just standard MPEG or whatever. And we asked them to ingest it and then start from the bomb was carried in a little bag. So find me the bomber, based upon all you've got is a little bag on a train in a station. And then them 2 days, people were basically worked through solving those problems. The start of the second day, we introduced streaming video as well, to see how they'd handle streaming versus archive. And interestingly, so it was a success, even though nobody actually solved the end-to-end problem. So, but why it was a success is, I think industry learned a huge amount about how difficult the problem was. It was a joint MOD Met Police project. So I think understanding the challenge, and actually we had a couple of companies say, I need to go back and relook at my website because I can't do what my website is claiming we can do, which is interesting. As it was an engineer talking, not the marketing person. And then we learned a whole lot as well. We learned about where the market was and other things we need to do. And then the one we did Thursday, Friday was around, we have a whole load of data. The data we used was telemetry data from an aircraft. And we want to share that data with industry, the US and France. But some of the data that we get off the aircraft is obviously sensitive, either commercially sensitive that the Airbus owned, or tactically sensitive that we wouldn't want to share with anybody. And what we were trying to do was apply machine learning to be able to understand and direct the data flow depending upon what the machine learning algorithm could learn about the data. And we did have 2 companies that ended up managing to do that. So what we're now doing is encouraging them to write a proposal to put into DASA to convert that hackathon project into a funded development project.
And that's part of the open call?
Part of the open call, yeah.
Okay,
so we've already ring-fenced money within DASA to say, if you get, we can't fund everything, but we've said, if you get proposals in, there's this pot of money, which was a couple of £100,000. There's this pot of money which is available for the best 2 projects that come in through the open call.
Okay, excellent. So that leads me nicely onto could we talk a little about your actual, I don't like to call it a pitch process?
Yeah.
So my experience of pitching to MOD was going into room, and I think there were 34 army people in there. And there were 4 of us, and it felt a little, to be honest, it was a little bit intimidating, if I'm brutally honest.
Yeah.
Is it still like that?
No.
Okay.
Well, I say no, it's not for us.
Not for you. Okay.
There are probably some of those things that still happen. For us, it's quite relaxed. So wherever possible, I try and encourage my team to come to you. So we get a different feel for your pitch and your company if we come to you rather than you come to one of our buildings. It's easier for you to demo as part of your pitch rather than us just receive PowerPoint. There would only probably be 2, 3, 4 of us max. It's certainly in the first one. So the first pitch is more about, let's understand what it is you've got, what it is you're actually pitching. So we can either go, actually this is really good and we can think of somebody that would be interested, or maybe not. So it's quite a quick process for us. And then the second session, we would make sure we've got end users there. So there would be more people, but ultimately they're going to be your customer. And yeah, it's not a come pitch, go away, we'll never talk to you again. We'll have that dialogue and feedback and try and understand what it is. So for us, the pitch isn't about, it's not like Dragon's Den where you got your 10 minutes and you pitch and that's it. We want the dialogue with you so we really understand what it is you're doing, because the pitch may not be perfect.
No, absolutely. Yeah. But presumably, does the ability to move from that first to second stage depend on your answer to those 7 questions? We're still going back to those
generally, yes.
7 important questions.
Yeah, generally. I mean, if we don't, we're definitely not the only route. But if it comes through us, it's back to the comment I made earlier. If we can't go and engage with our colleagues and say, we think this is really good, we think it really solves one of your problems, we're not going to feel comfortable in doing that. So for us, answering those 7 questions really helps us feel comfortable that that we can confidently go and have the next conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what happens then? So we go through the first pitch, we go to the second pitch.
Yep. Second pitch. After the second pitch, and an end user says, yeah, actually this would be really good, and actually the end user will share more of their problem there as well. This would be really good. Then we would go into an alpha beta, if the product's real.
Yeah.
At the end of the beta, and this is a bit of the thing that we haven't managed to solve yet, and is the bit of the downer for the SME. So many years ago, there was an Act of Parliament passed that said all procurement for MOD needs to be competed. And so although we can fast track the alpha and the beta, so you learn a whole load about us and the problem, and we really understand a really good way of solving the problem, we still have to go to competition if we want to buy something to roll out across MOD. But I still believe the alpha beta process is worth doing, because we've just been educated on a way of solving our problem that maybe we hadn't thought about before. And you guys really understand our problem better. So when you do your bid, you're able to articulate how you solve that problem rather than just pitch some tech. So I don't have a specific number is the honest answer, because we're not measuring it that way. I would say there's probably a good 50-60% make it through to we will end up then running a competition in the next 12 months or so. Now I only have a 2-year sample so far because we've only been doing this 2 years, but our filter is really alpha. So the pitch of do we really have a problem this is helping to solve, and then the alpha is does it really do what you claim it does. By the end of that point, we've got a pretty high confidence that actually there's a good fit for this. So the alpha is usually are there any gotchas when we put it on one of our networks, or the end user hates it or something like that. So, but by the time we get to that point, it's it's usually a pretty good fit. So we want it to be a bit of a higher percentage, but I'd probably say about maybe 2/3 at the moment go through. That's a good question. We need to think about that a bit more. I mean, we'll probably blast it out through Twitter and LinkedIn and everything else. It's being worked on at the moment, so hopefully it won't take too many months to get ready. Our challenges will be pure challenge, with a view that we don't mind which type of company can fix them. Probably we see the majority of them at the moment are being fixed by smallish companies. because most of the large companies are either coming to us with a pitch that says, give us a load of money and we can develop something for you, or they're working with SMEs anyway. So we do encourage a lot of brokering between big systems integrators and SMEs. But most of the time, I think it's probably going to be a smallish company that will solve it. But we try and just go with the challenge. Here's our problem. How can you help? The only issue for us would be which country it's outsourced to, and generally Russia, China, North Korea. Don't even phone us. Most other places is probably okay. It would just vary. So I had to ask a question a little while ago because I wasn't quite sure where we stood with Israel. But actually the view is we're fine. We just go through a little bit more testing, but it doesn't really matter where the development's done as long as it's not one of those three countries.
Do you need to change your developers?
They're open to anybody. So I think the thing I recognise that we're not very good at, and DASA recognises as well at the moment, is back to your question, is we're pretty rubbish at marketing. So DASA have just brought on a marketing partner. At the moment, I think it sort of requires you to know where to look from our side. We need to do a better job at that. But all the hackathons are open. So we had, for the video one, we had 60 people from 32 companies, and the analytics one I think was roughly about the same. So and all sizes. So one of the companies that did best in the video one was a 2-man company from Israel, bizarrely.
And do you have another one planned?
Not yet, but the next one is likely to be around data compression and acceleration. So how do we're sort of titling it the right data, right place, right time, right bearer. Because one of the challenges that we have is, obviously when we're in the UK, it's not really an issue. As soon as we go overseas, whether it's on a ship or a overseas base, then we're using satellites and everything else to get the data back. And when you have something urgent you need to get, at the moment it struggles, and at the moment our approach very generically is we just buy more bandwidth. Where actually I think, again, technology's got to a stage these days where we can automatically prioritize, compress, and do a whole lot of other stuff to make sure we optimize our bandwidth, really. So that will probably be the next one. Generally I say I don't read very much, but so don't give me a 50-page document. But if you want to pitch on PowerPoint or whatever you want to use, it doesn't matter. In all of our offices there's open internet access, so you can run your demos if you want to, or we come to you and you run your demos. Generally I prefer to see something. Well, no, so take that statement back a bit. Depending on the maturity of your product, if you've got something that's real, for me, give me a demo, because I can understand it better than PowerPoint.
So I'd just like to spend a few minutes talking about your earlier days and startup experience. Yep. And I suppose my first question is, if Danny Wootton now was to speak to the Danny Wootton who had the failed startup because of the cash flow issue,
yep.
What would he tell him to do or not to do? I'd
definitely tell him to do it again. I think it was the best time of my career. I think I learned the most from that stage. So it's probably easier to talk about what happened with them, because I'm not quite sure I could package it up into do something different. So one of them was, and it's very ironic because this was the timing one. So this was back in early 2000s and in the days of WAP on a mobile phone. Okay. So I'm looking at some of the audience and they're probably going, I don't even know what WAP is. And never experienced it, but for maybe our age group, we know it was the greatest thing ever to happen on a mobile phone, but it wasn't really that good. So we had this idea and created a demo to enable people to look via their their WAP-enabled phone for buying a CD online, taking that into HMV, using a barcode for HMV to then scan it, price match, and sell the CD from HMV. The two challenges we had, one was the user experience was horrendous because WAP was just awful. And HMV said, we don't think we'll ever have that competition. We don't really need the solution you're pitching.
Excellent.
The internet would never take off. We'll always have our record stores.
It's a blockbuster moment.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So, but 5-10 years too early. So, if I was given my previous self a bit of advice, I don't know what it would be on that one, because at the time it was still not a bad idea. I suppose my advice would be, your user experience sucks and people won't use it. So I was probably in a bit of the tech's really good. So rather than what I now preach, really. So that was one. The two we exited, one was a really technical base station. Entrepreneur was a great telco engineer. It pretty much was a wind-powered and solar-powered micro base station that had 4 different technologies: Wi-Fi, LTE, WiMAX, 3G in it, all on the same technical backplane. So technically it was very, very clever. And we actually didn't think we could make a business out of it, but we knew we could sell the technology. So we sold it to Nokia in the end. The other one was just a mobile SMS marketing company. Nothing very special at all, but it had a customer base. The company was struggling, and we just did a bit of a turnaround on it. So a sort of mixed bag of things, really. I think the advice, would be definitely do it. Definitely think about the equivalent of the 7 questions. Think about the user experience, and probably one of the hindsight bits is actually, what do you want to do with the company? And this wasn't advice for me. This was actually where we had a number of sort of tense moments between me and my friends and partners at the time, where one of them really wanted to grow the business and was ready to remortgage his house and just do anything for the businesses to survive. I was in between the two. I was sort of okay with not earning any money and bankrolling it a little bit. And my other colleague, he needed income. He just wanted to exit and or earn fees. And so I think one of the learning curves was actually have that conversation really early, because actually that we did fall out. We've all made up many years ago. And now sort of joke about it, but actually it was a really difficult phase for us. So I think the biggest one is have that conversation early.
Yeah, and funnily enough, Reem, who's from Accelerated Digital Ventures, who was here last time, absolutely bought that as that founder alignment.
Yeah,
is key. You need to have that conversation very early on.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the 7 questions again, because I think they're a good summation of everything that a startup should have answers to, no matter who they're selling to, but especially big business.
Yeah.
So could you just repeat the 7 questions, and then we can see?
I do need to get these online. Maybe I'll do a LinkedIn thing with them on. So, what's the problem you're solving, or what's the opportunity you're creating? So, in effect, what is my pain point, or the opportunity that you're creating for me? What's your USP, and against whom? So, lots of people come with a USP that we look at and we go, don't really think so. But I think if you then say, actually against these other companies that are in the market as well, but this is why we're different, I think having that comparison is really useful. What's innovative about it? That, depending on who you're pitching to, that's less important, but if it's pitching to us, we only really want to do projects of things that are quite innovative. The level of maturity, I don't know if I mentioned this when I said, actually the commercial model, don't need pricing, but I sort of need to understand how I'm going to pay for it. So is it license? Is it pay as you use? Is it a one-off? Whatever. how does it scale, and how do you support us at scale, and then the cost benefit. So there's two answers to that. There's my answer of how I look at things and how I look at innovation within the MOD. And for me, it's just, are we doing something different that gives us a benefit? So the lateral thinking from one market into our market, for me, is fine, because that's still innovative for us. The question for you guys to answer is really, I want to know why it's different. Mainly because that helps me when I go and have my discussions with my commercial team, that says, well, why should I do a sole source agreement with this particular company? And if it's well, this company does SMS and email marketing and they're a little bit better than everybody else, I know the answer is going to be run a competition. If there's something that says, actually there's this unique element to what they do, which then fits with the other questions, then for me that makes my life a lot easier and actually gives you an easier ride into mod for us to do something. But it's two halves. For me, it's not that well defined. It's just as long as it's different. But you really need to think about why it's a combination of USP and why it's innovative, really.
I suppose in your WAP example, it may have been innovative, but the customer didn't recognise the problem, did they?
Yeah,
HMV.
exactly, yeah.
So unless you're combining it with that customer recognising the problem, you're sort of doesn't really matter, does it?
So for me, that's sort of the proposition thing versus the tech thing. So if I was a small company pitching into mod that said, I'm only small at the moment, I have this great HR system that you could, it's better than anybody else's, and you could roll it out across mod, and here's all the benefits. My question would be, who are you going to partner with to support that whilst you grow? So it's back to you thinking about the proposition you're bringing us, rather than the tech and the service that you as a company do. Because I still need that problem solved, and I'm happy for you to partner with somebody bigger who can support you for the next 3 years whilst you grow. That's not an issue for me, but it's you thinking through those things to bring me the answer. May do, yeah, depending on what it is. So if it's so we're like any other big organisation, we have help desks and operation centres and stuff like that. So although we do actually outsource it, we supply our own tier 1, tier 2 support, and only go to industry for tier 3. But it's just thinking through, it's bringing those answers to us that you've thought about them, rather than bringing us a bit of the problem and then say, well, yeah, up to you to solve the rest. The accelerator is a virtual accelerator, so it doesn't have a building. It's all about the projects it runs, the funding and support. So I'm generalising here, but they have 3 phases of the project. Doesn't matter what your maturity is, but just their process. So they don't do investment, but in effect they pay for development, even though you keep the IP. So phase 1 would probably be about £100,000. If it then goes to phase 2, probably 200, 250, something like that. Phase 3 is yet to be defined because they haven't got too many projects to phase 3 yet. The bit that I'm trying to encourage them to do is using phase 3 to, in effect, cross the valley of death. So how do I take it from a TRL 7 demonstrable in a lab product to how do I deploy it? Because end of the day, somebody has to fund it. So it's either you guys have to go and bankroll it yourself or get external investment to do it, or we have to pay for it through the procurement cycle. And if we pay for it through the procurement cycle, we'll end up owning the IP. So I'm trying to encourage the phase 3 bit, which is, I'm trying to tweak them on phase 2 to say, if somebody comes and says, I want £200,000 for this project, we should do due diligence on phase 2 that might say, if I'm going to end up deploying that, I want to give you £300,000, but you need to do this extra piece of work, because that means I can deploy it. And then phase 3 is really around the getting all the other rest of the wrapper around it, really. So yeah, they're virtual. It's all about money, access to customers, and access to test environments if you need a test environment. If we've ended up paying for development for deploying into live, the current MOD stance is that we own IP. So it's only when we fund through DASA, we don't own the IP. So it's a different set of rules if you go through an accelerator program versus, so if we went out to tender and said we want a particular problem solved, and the only way of solving that was to pay for bespoke development to do our problem, we will own the IP for that. So it's advantageous for companies to go through the accelerator, get as far developed as you can through that route, because you retain all the IP. We don't, and at the moment, and we are exploring early stages of sort of an equivalent of a corporate venture. What we are more likely to do, and again, it's a bit of work we're working on at the moment, is more of a brokering sort of model, where, because again, one of the challenges that we have, if you're a UK company and you create the best crypto in the world, we want that to remain UK sovereign. And the only way potentially of doing that is a UK VC puts the funding in. The last thing we would want is Chinese VC to come and own the company. So what we're trying to look at the moment is, how do we create a network of UK venture capitalists that we can come along with a project to say, if this was developed through to deployable, we will buy it. So can one of you make the appropriate investment? So that's work in progress at the moment.